Black history of rock and roll, Black history of rock and roll, Black history of rock and roll, Black history of rock and roll.
1957, I went to a New York Paramount Alan Freed rock and roll show, and Jay was one of the performers. And that was before the coffin days. But what he did was they would announce him, and then the stage would be bare, and across the stage would come these clattering teeth, And then from out of nowhere, you see, then the curtains would open, and it'd be like this guy would have his back to you, go, I put a spell like that. He just jumped out at you like that. And as a kid, you just, jump back.
His voice, when he did that, I put a spell on you, this cat scared me, and I'm standing there looking at him, you understand?
But there's so much more to Screamin' Jay than just his shtick. His shtick is just the icing on the already packaged deal. He didn't even need to do that. But that was his gimmick. In the 50s, you needed a gimmick.
Before Alice Cooper, before Kiss, before Arthur Brown, before Screamin' Lord Sutch, before Marilyn Manson, before any of these juggalos, cats like Twisted or Insane Clown Posse, before freaking Insane Poetry, Necro, any of these sort of horror, shock rock, shock rap, horrorcore, hardcore punk types, or horrorcore hip hop types, or bands like the Cramps that, kind of like the horror punk death rock type groups like Super Heroines, 45 Grave, the Misfits, being more of a horrorcore band, or like any of these groups that had those themes in rock and roll. Before them, there was Screamin' Jay Hawkins. Screamin' Jay Hawkins was the first to put forth those themes. Even when you talk about post-war period, and his influences on groups like, Arthur Brown, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, and Screamin' Lord Sutch and the Savages, which also had an influence on even Black Sabbath and whatnot. He pretty much to do what he did in that time was the first, and it was almost like kind of, I would say kind of revolutionary in a sense of just people questioning things in their life, even though he kind of had a really campy stage performance, to represent something like things that would scare you at night, or even the reality of your mortality, says a whole lot. Especially being a black man in America, and being a black man playing what was considered blues or R&B, which was also considered rock and roll, and he wasn't Chuck Berry, he wasn't Little Richard, he definitely wasn't Elvis either, but it frightened and intrigued people at the same time. He had the song, the only hit that he's known for, I Put a Spell on You, which was about a woman that he was going out with that he really dug, and he supposedly cheated on her and she left him. And basically it was just like a love song to her. And yeah, he ends up, I saw in some documentary, he ended up actually taking that woman out and told her, hey, this song was for you. And I think they got back together, but he ended up cheating on her again, unfortunately. Not to put that out there, that's personal. I try to focus on the music more so, but Screamin' Jay Hawkins was known for a lot of his antics on stage, with the chattering teeth, the explosions, his skull cane, friend by the name of Henry with the cigarette in his mouth, And now you see like Alice Cooper and his snake and stuff, like those kind of accompany on stage. But the thing about Screamin' Jay that's interesting too is like he was more than just that. His voice was amazing. I mean, if you really listen to what he's, singing and how he's singing. Now, he's a great storyteller too. Like Constipation Blues. He had a lot of funny songs like that, and Alligator Wine. But he had those spooky tunes like Whistling in the Graveyard. I think that may have been a cover. But what's the name? I Hear Voices. That's the other one. That one's really creepy. That was an original. Yeah, I Hear Voices, and like there's a few other ones in there too. But even back to his vocal style, he actually wanted to be an opera singer, which he actually did sing an opera before he passed, like a few months before he passed. There's a documentary about him doing that too, and let alone his life. He was really into Paul Robeson, and you'll see that in basically the way he sings. You could tell I'm a Paul Robeson fan too when it comes to his voice. He has that rich, deep, dark, like baritone voice that's just really pronounced, that could shake the ground. With Screamin' Jay, it's like he mixed that operatic tone with just like the sheer howl of what became blues, and just, he had this persona of this sort of kind of just like this horror, like, I don't want to compare him to Vincent Price. I'm sure people would, but like this, like kind of, some people might say, like kind of a voodoo priest type dude. I don't know if that would be correct. Some people didn't like the fact that he did that because they thought it was stereotypical, but he made his own thing, out of that character. But it was just more than that character. Like, he was more than that character. And I think at times he kind of felt that it pigeonholed him, with things that I've read, And it's funny, even thinking about the character of Blackula, he was before that. And I wonder if they based the character loosely off of him to some degree, even though Screamin' Jay, you could laugh at his tunes. Blackula was brutal. And ironically, the guy who played Blackula, I forget his name, he was an opera singer, from what I remember reading about him. But Screamin' Jay, like, he's had other tunes, like that stand the test of time, that have nothing to even do with sort of his shock stick, and you could hear his voice just really cool over that, and I mean, Temptation is one of them, and that's more of a lounge tune. But there's another tune that I forgot what it was. Tunes like In My Dreams and All Night. Screamin' Jay, like, just, I mean, shoot. The brother was like just an amazing vocalist. He had a great stage presence. He's way ahead of his time as far as like the whole shock thing, and the sort of Count Dracula sort of persona, yeah, man. Oops. So yeah, the Screamin' Jay Hawkins, enough respect. I thought I would do a Black History of Rock and Roll on him, and just give an unsung tribute to this guy right here. I know it's like yeah. So this is Black History of Rock and Roll. Let me know what you guys, yeah, he's influenced a lot of people, So all you little goth rock, death rock, horror rockers, psychobilly horror looking cats, acid rappers, freaking horrorcore hip hoppers, all y'all kind of, and even people like Dr. Octagon, which kind of, some of his stuff reminds me of Screamin' Jay Hawkins, kind of on this comedy, goofy, like comic book rap type stuff too. Even I would even say Jimmy Castor to some degree too, because they all had kind of that vibe, real storyteller, but just kind of funny. I forget the name of that one rapper. He's one of the first rappers that kind of had that vibe, that kind of sort of spooky vibe. Oh man, how could I forget this man's name? Hold up. Was it Jimmy Spicer, I think? But all those kind of goofy storytelling type, kooky, campy songs kind of remind me of Screamin' Jay. I know he wasn't the only one to do that, but in the context of, rock and roll and blues, he was among the first. Well, no, blues is a tradition, but just his stuff was really funny, like aside from some of the more spookier stuff, which he kind of even mixed the two. Anyway, this is Black History of Rock and Roll, signing out. Peace.